Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 12 of Stuart's Saturday Live. Can you believe 2025 is nearly at an end? It's been quite an eventful year with all sorts of amazing work on the Stuart period and the 17th century in general being published, and more readers are getting to know and love this incredible time period. Well, last night I attended a medieval carols concert at the Crooked Spire in nearby Chesterfield, and it was really incredible. There were a few 17th century pieces included, and I really enjoyed it. Uh, if I look back over the year, we've had so many wonderful guests, and I will talk about each one individually at the end of the show. But this year was also momentous in that we had the Stuart History Festival in Worcester back in July, and it was so heartening and thrilling to be involved in something so amazing with people who are as passionate about this often overlooked time period as I am. And I'm really looking forward to hopefully being part of that again in the future. Some news, as I mentioned in our previous episode last month, we recently released an audiobook, The Fugitive Sword by Eleanor Swift Hook. I narrated it. My husband's company, Orland Media Limited, produced it. And it's a rip-roaring historical adventure set in the 17th century, specifically during the 30 Years' War. And it was really great to be part of it. Eleanor is such a beloved author in our Stuart history community. So yeah, if you are wondering what to do this weekend, I suggest perhaps you can head on over to the preferred audiobook retailer of your choice, and you can listen to a sample and perhaps enjoy that and let me know what you think. And so, yes, it was wonderful to be part of that. And we'll see what next year holds. It's time now to introduce you to today's special guest, Jennifer Morag Henderson, who is a writer from the Scottish Highlands. Her main interest is in history and biography, and she is known for her highly acclaimed biography, Josephine Tay, A Life. Jennifer has degrees from the University of Glasgow and Huzi, I think I pronounced that correctly, University in Canada, and studied French at l'Institut Français d'Écosse and the Université de Caen. Her second book, Daughters of the North, Jean Gordon and Mary Queen of Scots, was longlisted for the prestigious Highland Book Prize. Now, Mary Queen of Scots had a life filled with very dramatic and often violent episodes in a country that was rapidly changing. One woman was dangerously close to many of these tumultuous events and figures, yet survived. But somehow she has been often completely overlooked. Joining us live from Inverness to chat with me about the incredible life of Jean Gordon and more, please welcome Jennifer Morag Henderson.
Hello.
Hello, Jennifer. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's lovely to be here.
Great. So Inverness, wow, I wonder, what's the weather like there today?
It's actually fairly mild, but I was just in London the other week, and possibly what I think is mild is actually quite cold.
Oh, oh. Yes, sadly, I've only been once to Inverness, but never got out of the car as we were on our way to Bewley to pick up Bertie, our golden retriever. But on top of the rich history and beauty of your local area, I've read that there is at least one amazing bookshop there. So I'll have to go back. I think there's quite a well-known one, I think.
Yes,
Am I right?
the ladies' bookshop. It's 10 minutes walk from where I live, which is both a
Oh.
good thing as it's wonderful and a bad thing as I do spend quite a lot of time and money there.
Oh, a fellow bibliophile, yes. Oh, I have the same problem. and storage space. That's the never-ending problem, I think. um, I'd I'd love to know what first got you interested in history.
Um, I think it's probably growing up in the Highlands. I actually grew up just outside of Inverness at a place called Culloden, which you may have heard of. There was a castle
Oh,
there.
yes.
So I grew up very, very close to the battlefield. So I don't remember a time when I wasn't hearing stories about history. My parents told me loads of stories, and I was just always fascinated by what had happened, what people were doing, how we ended up where we are now. Yeah, and then the kind of Mary Queen of Scots time period really captured my imagination.
Yeah, wow. Uh, Turning now to your book, Daughters of the North, Jean Gordon and Mary Queen of Scots. Now, Mary Queen of Scots is one of those hugely well-known figures from history. I mean, her tragic and often perhaps overly romanticized story is quite complex, as is the case with 16th century Scotland. Um, but I think for those who don't really know her story yet, could you
Mhm.
please tell us a bit more about her parents and her elder half-brother, James Stuart, first Earl of Moray, and, just sort of the context of where she comes into the picture, please.
Yeah, when I was writing, I was very aware that people were going to have like an idea of Mary Queen of Scots, and I felt that was a
Mm,
really good way to get people into the story. I think most people do know that she was sent away from Scotland at a very young age to
mm,
France because her mother was French. And the idea was that Mary Queen of Scots was going to marry the French Dauphin, the French heir to the throne.
mm,
So she grows up, Mary Queen of Scots grows up in France, and she has this kind of gilded childhood where everyone at the French court loves her. But then, unfortunately, her first husband dies very young, and she ends up coming back to Scotland. Um, and one of the reasons that she'd had to be sent away as a child is that Scotland was so unstable because her father had died just after she was born. So
mm.
there was a period of quite a lot of instability, but eventually Mary Queen of Scots' mother, who was called Mary of Guise, she had eventually become the regent, and she was kind of ruling with the support of her powerful Guise family from France, and with French backing. But that
Mm,
wasn't so popular in Scotland because they didn't want to be ruled by France.
right.
And then also at the same time, Scotland was becoming Protestant. And unlike in England, where it's a kind of top down change of the church being imposed from the king downwards, in Scotland, it was very much the ordinary people were embracing this new Protestant religion, whereas Mary of Guise remained Catholic. So
Right.
you have Mary Queen of Scots, she eventually comes back to Scotland, but you've got all these tensions between France, Scotland, England, and between Catholic and Protestant. So it's a really,
Right.
really unsettled time.
Yes. And I think in your book you mentioned that Scotland was seen by the French as a sort of satellite um, court for them. It's like definitely
Yeah,
not independent and
yeah. I mean,
so under
it is
them.
much smaller than France, and it's
Mm,
not as powerful. And um, the French did see it as kind of a little bit of a backwater, and
right.
they kind of like they were looking at England and they were thinking, well, we could then attack England from each side if we had Scotland, and we could come from Scotland and France, and this is part of the dynamic with England as well. Partly Scotland is friends with France because they have an enmity with England.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, so Mary Queen of Scots, when she returns to Scotland as a young woman, ready to take up her throne, when her own mother has died, so she's lost her mother and her father. She's coming
Mm,
back to a place that is really unsettled. There's a lot going on, and essentially she didn't really understand it because she's been brought up in France and she
mm,
doesn't understand what's going on at the court. So the
right.
first thing she does is she turns to someone who she thinks is going to help, which is her half brother, James Stuart. But unfortunately, in my book, he eventually kind of becomes rather the villain, because he has his own agenda, which is not necessarily to help his half sister, and he's also Protestant, whereas she is Catholic.
So he was quite ambitious,
He
really.
was very ambitious. I mean, he's the bastard son of James V. So he really feels that he should be in charge in Scotland. He's the son of the king. He's powerful. He's Protestant at a time when the country has become Protestant. He had a following, but he's not the full son of the king.
Wow, it's very complex, and of course, one would understand how Mary would assume that her blood, even if it's a half blood, would have been on her side. I mean, personally, I completely trust my siblings.
Yeah.
And so I understand her position. And it's a shame that wasn't proven to be true for her. That is a shame. But yes, very complex situation. And it's so important to see the context of her life. And so thank you for telling us about that. You mentioned how it was different in Scotland, that it wasn't top down with this change. So the country was originally Catholic, and then it was made Protestant. And you've mentioned that it's mainly the general population wanted this change, and those on the upper echelons of society were still clinging to their Catholicism. But it would have been very difficult, and I think you do cover this, that for Mary Queen of Scots to be having private Catholic mass, that sort of wouldn't sit right with the general population, perhaps.
Yeah, it is a really complex situation, but I think sometimes for the reader it's not too complex, because you can just remember that Mary Queen of Scots, like that's what she was dropped into, was this situation that she didn't fully understand. So if you feel like, I don't know what's going on, and you're really getting what Mary Queen of Scots felt at that time. So yeah, the kind of general population, the Protestant movement had really taken hold, and then the nobles then start supporting it. So the lords of the congregation kind of come together and say, yes, we are behind the Protestant movement, and we believe this now. But there was still a strong Catholic party as well, and Jean Gordon's father was the most powerful Catholic nobleman at the time.
Wow.
So
yes.
He did have the idea that perhaps Mary Queen of Scots would come back from France, join with him, and they would make Scotland Catholic again.
Right.
But Mary Queen of Scots, she had been advised by her half brother, and also by others, that would not work. It would lead. It would have just been too much. They wouldn't have been able to reverse the changes of the Protestant Revolution. So what Mary tried to do was, she tried to be very, very tolerant, and she tried to say, we can make this work. Scotland can remain Protestant, and what I will do is I will have mass myself, but it will always be private. So and that was a compromise, and it didn't completely work, but it kind of worked at the beginning.
I see. Wow. And there was one very prominent figure at this time. So who was John Knox, and why was he so influential?
So John Knox is the leading Protestant reformer, and he has become the minister in St Giles Cathedral, which is the main church in the centre of Edinburgh, the capital city. That's just up the road from Holyrood Palace, where Mary Queen of Scots is based. So, and he has an absolutely massive popular following. Hundreds, thousands of people come to listen to him preach. every Sunday. And I think it must have been an incredible sight, because people almost believed that he was another prophet, that he was directly inspired by God. And he gave these
Wow.
incredible sermons, like he was a real fire and brimstone preacher. It was very much like you would list off the faults that people had, and then list off how you could find the solutions to these things. And he just had an incredible personal following. And he hadn't come from a rich or noble background.
Oh,
He had a very interesting. He had at one point been a slave on a galley ship,
wow.
a French ship, and but he was a true believer, and it really was a time of religious change, and people, just a whole swirl of ideas, and people thinking this is it, something really big is happening, and just an amazing time period. I find the 16th and 17th centuries just fascinating for these new ideas, and the Reformation and sort of revolutions that are happening in people's religious thought.
Yes, it is extraordinary. All the ideas and movements that came about during these 2 centuries. Um, and the thing is about Knox, he wasn't sort of super subservient to the Queen. He had some rows with her, and she would be left crying quite often, I think.
Yes.
So he didn't mince words with her.
No, they famously met, and Mary Queen of Scots and John Knox met in person, and then they have this big argument about religion, and Mary ends up in floods of tears.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary meeting of these two huge personalities as well, and yeah, incredible.
Well, he probably was a little intimidating with that kind of personality. I dare say I'd probably be left in floods of tears myself. Oh, wow. So many of our viewers and listeners are well acquainted with the history of Mary, Queen of Scots, but I reckon not many know about Jean Gordon. Would you please tell us a bit about Jean and her family, the Gordons? And I tried today to try to copy her look, and
I
so
love it.
that's what I was doing today. Thank you.
Yeah, so Jean Gordon, she's the daughter of George Gordon, Lord Huntly, and he was the most powerful Catholic nobleman in Scotland. And his power base is up in the northeast of Scotland. And he is so powerful that he is known, one of his nicknames is the King of the North.
Wow.
And this is pre-clearances Scotland, so the population is very evenly spread. So we're talking about, he has a very large power base in terms of land and manpower.
Mm-hmm.
So Jean is his youngest daughter. He has a large family. She has lots of very strong, tough brothers, and two sisters as well. But most people know her through her involvement in Mary Queen of Scots' story, because Jean Gordon is the first wife of the notorious Earl of Bothwell.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So
wow.
Yeah. So
that's quite a well-known name there too.
Yeah. So she is. That was my introduction to Jean Gordon. Was this triangle? It's not really a triangle between Mary, Jean, and Bothwell. So that's kind of how I first got interested. But yeah, when she was growing up, Jean was a woman of power and influence in a very important family. But they have a fairly complex history of what happens to them.
Wow. So Jean's father, Huntly, found himself at odds with Mary, Queen of Scots, and especially with her elder half brother. And there was a major battle, and I'd like you to pronounce that, because I'm probably not going to say it properly.
Corricky. The Battle of Corricky.
That's
it. So is illogical at first glance that Mary Queen of Scots and the Earl of Huntly should be enemies, because they shouldn't be enemies. He's really powerful, he's Catholic, she's Catholic. They absolutely should have been working together. But because Mary Queen of Scots has decided she's going to pursue this policy of toleration, she cannot be seen to be allied with the most powerful Catholic in Scotland, because that's instantly going to make all the Protestants be against her.
Right.
So this was the advice that she was getting from her half-brother, James Stuart. But there was also a kind of secondary consideration. We usually know her half-brother, James Stuart, we usually know him by his title, the Earl of Murray. So Murray, the lands of Murray at this time were not actually hereditary, they were crown land. So the king or queen decided who had Murray and who was the Earl of Murray. Before Mary Queen of Scots' half-brother is made the Earl of Murray, Jean's father is the Earl of Murray. And he really, really wants the lands of Murray back. And Mary Queen of Scots' half-brother does not want him to have those lands. He wants to be the Earl of Murray. So he first of all, he doesn't like Jean's father because he's Catholic. And secondly, he doesn't want him to have these Murray lands. So although Jean Gordon in another world could have been Mary Queen of Scots' friend right from the beginning, what actually happens is ends up her entire Gordon family end up as Mary Queen of Scots' enemies, and they end up going into battle against Mary Queen of Scots, and then they are defeated at the Battle of Corrihy.
Right, and her father did die after this, but not from battle wounds, but probably a heart attack. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's in the archives. What it says is he's been defeated, he's been captured, and they're leading him away from the battlefield on his horse. And it says that he suddenly swelled and burst. He was quite a large man, and the description of it suggests a heart attack or a stroke or something like that. Yeah, but it's very, and it was very shocking for everybody who saw it, and yeah, the Battle of Corrihy is a real tragedy for Jean and her family.
Yes, and I found that what happened to him posthumously, I found it rather grisly. His embalmed remains were propped up at a trial some time later in front of Mary Queen of Scots. Could you explain why his corpse was subjected to this? I mean, he was eventually buried 4 years after his death, I think.
Yeah, and 16th century Scotland's a very violent place. So yeah, because he had technically committed treason against his queen, you had to go on trial for treason. So the standard procedure was that the corpse was embalmed and it was propped up in a coffin in front of the Scottish Parliament, in front of Mary Queen of Scots, in front of Huntly's wife, in front of his sons, probably in front of Jean Gordon as well. She was probably there as well. Yeah, it's very, very gruesome. And yeah, it kind of changed my opinion of Mary Queen of Scots, imagining her presiding over this scene as well.
It's quite shocking. But perhaps similarly grisly was what happened to Jean's brother, John. What happened to him?
So again, yeah, he's judged as having been treasonous against his queen, and he's sentenced to be beheaded. So he is publicly beheaded in Aberdeen. Unfortunately, the executioner does not do a clean job, and again, that's something that Jean Gordon herself would have been there to watch this, as was Mary Queen of Scots watching this, and Mary sort of famously again collapsed in tears, and because she knew Jean Gordon and her brother, she knew them personally. She'd met these people, personally, and to watch this, it was, yeah, a very violent time.
Yes. Wow. Boy. Um, so next up, I think we should talk about Henry Lord Darnley. So Mary's cousin. He turned up. He was a very handsome man. Oh, and by the way, this is a recent acquisition for the 17th Century Lady archives. And he was a very handsome man. I think that's one of the most most we can say in his favor, I suppose. Out of all the men Mary could have chosen to marry, why do you think she chose this man? What was his allure?
Um, yeah, I mean, Mary, Queen of Scots, is famously attracted to Darnley, and he is supposed to be very handsome.
Mm.
On paper, he's not such a bad choice of husband because he has a claim to the English throne. He has a connection to the Scottish throne. He's got the right birth. He's had the right sort of upbringing. Yeah, I mean, Mary and then Elizabeth in England, they have this problem that if they marry a subject, they are then raising a subject like the king is then going to be more powerful than them because he's a man. So who does a queen marry? Like Mary, Queen of Scots, was looking at all what other kings were there, what other princes were there. But then if a queen marries the king or of a different country, she has to then go to that different country. So they were really in an almost impossible situation, both Mary and Elizabeth, trying to fit in with these sort of weird unwritten rules around queenship. So yeah, Darnley, good on paper. Unfortunately, I don't know how can you describe Darnley whilst still being polite. He's not got the best reputation. He was very
Yeah.
he wanted the privileges of being royal without any of the responsibilities.
I think that's summing him up very well, actually. And he does come across as someone who got quite sullen if things weren't going his way, a little moody, a bit petulant. So
Childish.
very childish, yes. So not the best, not the best aspect, personality-wise, for one's husband. Yeah, so that's not great. Oh, just to let people know, I do have the live chat up on YouTube. So if you do want to make a comment or ask a question, I can see everything right now. And that wasn't the case previously. So I've got it up just in case. And yeah, so next we have the Earl of Bothwell. And although mentioned increasingly from early on in your book, he gradually became more important as time went on. So this portrait of Bothwell is in the National Galleries of Scotland collection. So what kind of man was he?
I find Bothwell completely fascinating.
Mm.
He seems to have divided opinion even within his own lifetime. He had some people who supported him very strongly, and he had some people who did not support him at all and could not have described him in worse terms.
Mm.
He was certainly a thug. He was certainly very violent, but he's also quite contradictory in that he is also extremely well educated, extremely smart, and he's slightly unusual because in an era when people are kind of define themselves as being either Catholic or Protestant, he lives in the borders right between Scotland and England. He's on the Scottish borders,
Mm-hmm.
and he defines himself as being Scottish at a time when other Scottish people who were Protestants felt that they had a lot in common with English Protestants. But
Ah,
Bothwell's in
wow.
the borders, and that's where the fighting always is when Scotland and
Mm.
England fight. So his he sees himself as Scottish first, and
I see.
he is kind of willing to work with Scottish Protestants and Scottish Catholics. He himself is Protestant, because it's almost as if Scotland is his overriding thing rather than his religion, which is not necessarily how it was at that time, because people religion was so important to them. Yeah,
Right.
he's a difficult person.
Yeah. Well, I did get that from the book, that he was he wanted to do what he saw was best for Scotland and Scottish interests. So that really came across. And it was interesting to see that. And you really did a wonderful job on this book, I have to say. I've got it here for those. I was given the soft copy. It's a lovely book, and it's very, very well researched. And as your cover quote says, it is utterly absorbing. I found that, and it was really nice to see the Mary Queen of Scots and Bothwell story that many of us know so well from a different view, and it was so refreshing. I thought it was really nice to see it, and incorporating Jean's life experience and everything. I thought that was really good, and it's a wonderful addition to the knowledge of Stuart history. So I think I really would like to commend you on that. And I got to say, it was very nice to come across the fact that you referenced my book, Sex and Sexuality in Stuart Britain. So that was really lovely to see that. Yeah.
No,
So
I found that really useful, actually.
Oh, yay!
Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
really wanted to try and understand, because what Mary Queen of Scots does is she sets up a marriage between Bothwell and Jean Gordon. And in some ways it's really, really smart, because Bothwell has this big power base in the borders and Jean Gordon has this big power base in the Highlands. So it's bringing like the North and the South together in support of Mary Queen of Scots. And because it's an arranged marriage, I really wanted to understand a little bit more about how people felt about the idea and concept of marriage and partnerships at that time, because that's a big part of Jean Gordon's story, is her 3 marriages.
Yes. And she saw it as, well, she was very practical about everything, I thought. And she knew it wasn't a love match. I mean, she was already in love with another man. So that's sad. It's sad that she wasn't able to marry the man she loved. But Bothwell appears, well, he was unfaithful pretty quickly with one of her servants.
Yes.
I think it was her seamstress or some.
Her seamstress, Bessie, yes.
Bessie, right.
And Bothwell also had another mistress with whom he had a child called Anna, who had been on the scene for quite a while, from Scandinavia. Yeah.
There's some controversy about that, because Anna was quite adamant that she was his lawful wife, because they had hand-fasted, and according to the culture in that part of Scandinavia, that was seen as tantamount to being lawfully wedded. So that's a whole other angle as well, another situation there. So he's not very faithful. Yes, so that'll come. That became an important point later on, I think, for them. So Mary's Italian secretary and friend, David Rizzio, was murdered a little over 2 weeks after Bothwell and Jean's wedding. And so here we have The Murder of David Rizzio, made by William Dickinson after a painting by John Graham in 1791, and from the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. So it's a very violent, again, another violent episode. And what was the reason behind this horrible murder that took place in front of a heavily pregnant Mary Queen of Scots, who was by this time already having trouble with her husband, Lord Darnley? What led to this?
Yeah, so everything is going to be different when Mary Queen of Scots has a child. So her being pregnant is really important. And all the lords around her were starting to realise how different it was going to be, and Darnley was not working out as a husband. He was not ideal, and so the lords convinced Darnley that he should be jealous of Rizzio, that Mary spent too much time with him. Rizzio was Italian, so he was foreign. He's Catholic. Again, it's the religion problem. Yeah, it's all still a kind of like a power struggle. Who's going to be in charge of Scotland? Can Mary, Queen of Scots, be in charge of Scotland when she is Catholic, when she is still very, very French in outlook, when she is surrounding herself with other foreigners?
Right.
Yeah, it's very, yeah, and it all comes down to this. There's kind of these big themes going on of religion and power, but then it all comes down to this one tiny room where Mary and Rizzio and a couple of others are having supper, and then the lords burst in and stab Rizzio and multiple times, and then he is thrown down the stairs with Darnley's dagger ostentatiously sticking out of his back, so that Mary Queen of Scots knows that her husband is involved in this.
Wow.
But the Jean Gordon, and she's only been married for a couple of weeks, she would have been in the palace while this was happening, and not at the dinner itself. Bothwell is also there. Bothwell has become very, very friendly with Jean Gordon's brother. And Bothwell, Jean Gordon's brother, who's called George, everyone's called George, and Jean Gordon's mother are the people who help Mary Queen of Scots she's captured essentially after Rizzio was murdered by the Protestant lords, and it's Jean Gordon and her family, her husband and her brother and her mother, who help Mary Queen of Scots to escape. And it's very much Mary Queen of Scots suddenly starts to see that her half-brother is not the person she should be trusting, that maybe she should have been trusting the Gordons all along. They're Catholic, they're on her side. So Jean Gordon's family, from having had this low point after the Battle of Corrihy, they're back in the fold, they're back in with Mary Queen of Scots, and now they are the people she turns to when this horrible murder happens.
Wow. Ooh, there's one thing after another in this
crazy fast. Like Mary Queen of Scots is not actually in Scotland for that long, but it's just like it is just one thing after another. And I think we start to see that in Mary's reactions as well. She can't cope. There's too much, and it affects her decision making.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody could cope with this. This is like a relentless stream of horrible incident after another. And one of these things could cause a great deal of trauma for someone, I think. And that's not all. It didn't end there, because Darnley himself was murdered. And Bothwell was implicated in this, and later
very
acquitted.
Heavily implicated.
Oh, yes. So what happened? Because this is a really mysterious event, and there was a huge explosion where he was, and yet he doesn't appear to have been damaged by any explosion. So what happened? This is such a mystery even now.
Yeah, it is still a big mystery. So Darnley is sick,
Oh.
and Mary Queen of Scots has had him put up in a house near to the Palace of Holyrood, but not actually. He's not actually staying with Mary Queen of Scots at this point. He's in a separate house called Kirkerfield. Um, and during the night, the house that Darnley is staying in is blown up. It's an absolutely massive explosion. Um, so everybody in Edinburgh comes running out to see what's going on, and they find Darnley's body. And at first they think he's been sort of blown out of the house by the explosion, but then they realise that in fact he wasn't in the explosion at all. It seems like he maybe got warning of the explosion and had climbed out of a window, and then somebody thinks they maybe heard him saying, sort of crying out for mercy, and then maybe he was strangled. Yeah, and they try to put people on trial, but the trial is definitely rigged, and they bring in. There were probably a lot of people who knew what had happened, but everybody wants to keep the secret because a lot of the people who know are very, very implicated in what is going on. And Bothwell is eventually put on trial for it. And
by Darnley's parents. I'm sorry. Yes, Darnley's parents, because other people weren't that bothered, perhaps, if that's a terrible thing to say, but Darnley wasn't really beloved, let's say that. And so, but his parents were, understandably distraught at their son's
so
death.
they insist that he's put on trial, but Bothwell invites all of his supporters to Edinburgh. So the whole of Edinburgh, is all these borders men are up in Edinburgh, and he rides to the trial surrounded by supporters. And that he's tried by a lot of people that he knows very well. And his alibi is that he was nowhere near the house when it was blown up. He was in bed with his wife, Jean Gordon. So she knew exactly what had happened as well, probably.
I see. Wow. Whew. Let's see. Oddly enough, although Bothwell and Jean married, and Mary Queen of Scots was one of the people at their wedding, they ended up having a divorce, and then Mary Queen of Scots married Bothwell herself. Again, this is a very complicated and very controversial period here, because it's not certain whether Mary was his lover for a long time, or if this was all under Bothwell's power over her or something.
I think it was pretty much Bothwell. I don't think that. I mean, this was how I first got interested in. I couldn't believe that there were books about Mary and Bothwell where there were such different explanations of it. I found that fascinating, that people could interpret history in different ways, and we didn't know the truth of what had happened. And people still argue about it. But I think it's pretty much accepted now that Mary and Bothwell were not lovers. It was not any sort of romance, no matter how it's shown in some films. It was very much Bothwell has this idea of Scotland. Scotland must be strong. How can Scotland be strong? It needs a strong king. Who could that be? That could be me. I just find him fascinating, because he's like, here's point A, here's point B. I shall go from one to the other, no matter what is in between. So he's like, Scotland needs a strong king. That's going to be me. What do I need to do? And he divorces Jean Gordon, and he abducts Mary Queen of Scots, and I guess most people probably know that this is the final straw for Mary Queen of Scots, and this is what leads to her downfall, to the escape to England, to the years of captivity.
Yeah. Oh, and many of us know that Mary Queen of Scots ended up having a very grisly fate, but so did Bothwell. For those who don't know, would you please summarize what happened to each of them, please?
Yeah, so Mary eventually, she decides she's not got any support in Scotland anymore, apart from Jean Gordon, who is not that supportive because Bothwell's just divorced her. But she has to. Mary Queen of Scots makes the decision to go to England because she thinks if she can speak to Elizabeth, they'll be able to work things out as cousins. And that does not work, and she is put in captivity. She never meets Elizabeth. She's in captivity for what, 19 years? Something like that.
Yeah.
And eventually she is beheaded on the orders of Elizabeth. And yeah, and Bothwell, I mean, no matter what he did in life, and he did some pretty terrible things, he did not deserve the death that he had. He tries to escape to Scandinavia. He's actually blown off course by a storm, but he first escapes through Scotland right up to the north, and then on through Orkney. And he ends up in Scandinavia, and he's imprisoned. And like Mary Queen of Scots, he's imprisoned for years and years and becomes increasingly irrelevant, basically, until they kind of forget who he is. He's just a madman in a prison who says he was King of Scots once. And he ends up in a pit, chained to a stake half his height, unable to stand up, with food being thrown down to him. Yeah, it just incredibly cruel. Yeah, and he kind of, all the bad things he did, the karma kind of catches up with him. The Scandinavian woman, Anna, who he had abandoned, she's not just a nobody, she's really powerful in Scandinavia. So she's instrumental in bringing him to trial in Scandinavia. So yeah, I was very affected by Bothwell's final fate. And it is, so much of Mary Queen of Scots' story is tragic.
Yes.
But then that's why I found Jean Gordon so interesting, because she manages to come out of this mess.
Yes, I mean, Bothwell and several of Jean's family members and Mary Queen of Scots, we're talking about very unpleasant ends for so many of them. And here's Jean, and somehow she manages to not only survive all this huge tumult and chaos and violence, she lives well into the 17th century, didn't she? I mean,
she lives into her 80s. Yeah, she doesn't die until 1629.
Wow.
So the changes that she saw in her lifetime, and she manages to take all this adversity, all these things that she's gone through, and it just makes her stronger. And she takes all the lessons that she's learned, all the scheming at Mary Queen of Scots court, and she applies that to her life going forward. And she builds an incredible new power base up in the north of Scotland with her second husband.
Wow. Who was her second husband?
So he is the Earl of Sutherland. So on her second marriage, she becomes Countess of Sutherland.
Okay.
Yeah, and her second husband, he's also a Gordon, a different branch of the Gordon family. So it's very much this. She goes back up north. She goes back to her family and to her roots and to the area that she knows. And she, and her husband sometimes described as a slightly weak man. Which I'm not sure if that's. I mean, he was leading people on the battlefield, so sort of the 16th century idea of weak is maybe like not in peak fitness, but I think it's sort of an indication of how powerful and how strong she was. That she is very much seen as an important player in the north of Scotland and in the whole of Scotland.
I see. Wow. And of course, Mary's son with Lord Darnley became James VI of Scotland, and later James I of England. Earlier this year, we had both Gareth Russell and Stephen Virapin join us to chat about him and his. Also, it was a very sad life, especially as a child. For him, I feel very, very sad for him. So it's been very lovely to go back one generation and see what came before with his mom and dad. And of course, that awful situation led to him being an orphan, really, and so he had to be around other people because his mum was pretty much gone. I think when he was 11 months old, she saw
Yeah,
him.
very
Yeah,
young. Yeah,
that's just terrible. I think you wrote that she played with him for one day and then
yeah,
she never saw him again, and that really got me as a mum as
yeah,
well, because it's something that's so joyous, to be with your child and play with them, and then the idea of not being able to see them again. It's just
yeah.
heartbreaking. It's just
She's
terrible.
riding away from seeing baby James when
Yeah.
she's abducted by Bothwell.
Oh boy. Very hard. Um, but Jean, did she have children? And did
She did have children, yes, and we
yeah?
know quite a lot about them because one of her sons, Robert, became a historian, and he writes a kind of family history. So it gives us some really fantastic detail about Jean's life with her second husband. She has three surviving sons and two surviving daughters. But we also even learn details about two children who were lost, and that is not something that you always get in
No,
histories, to find out those details about women's lives. And I felt that was really, really important. It really helped build the picture of Jean's life. And you get this sense from her son's writing of a very, very happy family.
that's lovely. So, despite all of the horrible, uh, horrible incidents that befell her family, she eventually found some contentment, and clearly she had some longevity, and she was
I
so
think
that
there's a lot more violent incidents, but she has got resilience now, so she is going to win. She is,
yeah.
yeah. There's a lot of really interesting history in the north of Scotland with the clans, who are
Mm,
still very, very powerful at this time.
right.
Really, like almost a competing system to the kings and queens of Scotland is these systems of clans with the clan
Right.
chiefs. Um, so yeah, I wouldn't say her life becomes uneventful, but
No.
certainly she is able to deal with stuff, and she really comes into her own as she gets older.
Wow, amazing. What an incredible life. Um, yeah, going back to your book again. Um, I I did mention to you in an email that I thought your photos were amazing. And and so yes, here's one. And so I have to ask, is photography one of your hobbies? Because they look
Yeah,
so lovely.
I really enjoy taking photos. That's Henley Castle, and I was really pleased that the publisher actually used part of that photo on the cover for the paperback. They thought it
Mhm.
was good enough quality to use for that. But yeah, I like to visit the sites where things have happened, and then try to photograph them. And I'm really pleased with how my publisher has managed to reproduce color photos, which I think are so important.
Oh, yes.
I look a lot at photos and portraits, especially when I'm
So
researching,
lovely.
and
Lovely.
yeah, it can bring the price point of a book up a little bit if you've got color photos, but they managed to do it in a really, really professional way. I think I'm really pleased with how the book came out. So yeah, it's and I find all the sites, all the castles so evocative. Um, we haven't really talked about Jean Gordon's third husband, the man who she was actually in love with all
Well,
along.
please, by all
So
means. Yeah, let's
yeah,
let's talk about him.
she didn't want to marry Bothwell in the first place because she was in love with a man called Alexander Ogilvy from the
Mhm.
northeast of Scotland, where she grew up. Um, And so she doesn't get to marry him. She has to marry Bothwell. Everything happens with that. And then she gets married to the Earl of Sutherland. But when she's an old lady, um, and she's widowed, her first love, he's also widowed, and they finally get together. And she has this third marriage, which is completely a love match. It's the man she's wanted to marry all her life, and they have a happy few years together at the end. And he has a castle in the northeast of Scotland. He built a castle, Castleboyne, and it's a ruin, and it's almost completely unmanaged. It's not a tourist site at all. It
Oh,
was an amazingly evocative, romantic place to visit. I took so many photos of that site, trying to capture what it was like. It's just an incredibly romantic ruin, and just to try and picture Jean and Alexander finally together after everything they had gone through at Mary Queen of Scots court. It was, yeah, the sense of scale in that place is amazing.
wow, that's so nice. Finally, a happy ending for
Yeah.
someone. Oh, that's lovely. Oh, I love that. That's quite romantic, and I'm a sucker for romantic stuff. Um, um, well, I think that she had an extraordinary life, as I said before, but that it also is nice that she had it end well. Um, and I would like to know. I mean, we briefly mentioned that Hollywood has its own views about the figures that we mentioned during this episode. Um, do you have a favorite film depiction of the people involved in this?
Um, I tell you what I saw quite recently, which was amazing, is Scottish Ballet have just done a full-length ballet on Mary Queen of Scots. And
Oh,
I wasn't sure about going because I've seen a lot of Mary Queen of Scots things.
mm-hmm,
And I'm so glad I went because it was absolutely amazing. I took my oldest son, a teenager, my
mm-hmm.
son's a teenager, and I took him to this ballet, and he'd never been to a modern ballet before. He had no idea what to expect. He was absolutely enthralled. The whole audience were. I would highly recommend Scottish Ballet's Mary Queen of Scots. I think it's still touring. So yeah.
Wow, that's brilliant. I've got a really big ballet fan here in the house. My 9-year-old, really into ballet, so I'm sure she'd like that, and it would have the added bonus of being about the Stuarts.
It was
Fantastic.
very cleverly done with all the costumes and simplifying the characters just enough.
Oh, it's great. Well, thanks for the tip. I'm sure many in our audience will be interested in seeing that. Um, your newest book is a biography in poetry. Um, can you pronounce that just so I don't mess it up?
It's Jofrid Gun.
Lovely. All right. And that was published only a few months ago this year. According to your website, you're learning Faroese, right? I mean, I love this.
Yes,
Are you still learning it?
I am. Yes, slowly.
Oh,
This was. I sort of became fascinated by some of the things I read in archives while I was researching Jean Gordon, and
yeah.
things that came up just once, people that came up just once, and then you couldn't research them or write about them in a traditional way. And I kind of ended up going down this side route about Clan Gun, and about the Faroe Islands, and this
Hmm.
this new book is the result of that.
Oh, wow. So could you tell us a bit more about it, about what I mean, and the process that you went through to write a biography in poetry, which is I've not read something like this
Yeah.
before.
So, so it's about a woman called Jofrid who comes from the Faroe Islands, and
Mhm.
this is the 16th, early 17th century, and she is brought from the Faroe Islands to marry into the clan Gun. And the
Okay.
idea is that you can read each poem individually, but when you put them together in order, they tell the story of her life.
Mhm.
Um, so it was these people in archives, and you get little glimpses. And I've always written poetry, and to me, those little glimpses, they were almost like little poems. Like
Mhm.
you would get just a really brief glimpse of a very intense relationship between a husband and a wife, for example, or um, descriptions of the places where they lived, the incredible geography of the far north of Scotland and the Faroe Islands. Um, and then also the kind of myths and stories that have built up around these things. A
Mhm.
lot of songs. I like to look at portraits while I'm researching and pictures. but I'm very interested in folk music and the kind of folk memory, and particularly how that's expressed through song and poetry.
Oh, that's lovely. Wow. Sounds wonderful. I'll have to get a copy of that, of your book. And finally, I would love to know, let's just see. Just bear with me a moment, please. Right. Okay. It's Stuart Fantasy Dinner Party time. I'd love to know who you would invite, what you would serve, and who you would sit next to.
Well, if I was thinking about my book, I think, yeah, definitely Mary Queen of Scots, Jean Gordon, Bothwell, because I would like to see them in a room interacting with each other. But I'm pretty
Yes.
sure if I was at a dinner party with them, that I would probably be the one serving the food, so they probably wouldn't be talking to me.
That would be the case for me too. I'd be serving, but it's okay. We could hear things. Yep. And what would you? Oh, well, yeah. I guess that actually you've answered everything there. Oh, well, thank you so much, Jennifer, for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure to talk with you about these incredible historical figures and your amazing book. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your afternoon today. And
Thank
thank
you
you
very
again.
much. Thank you. It was really interesting questions. So much to think about. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, I really enjoyed chatting with Jennifer about Mary Queen of Scots, the Earl of Bothwell, Lord Darnley, and of course, Jean Gordon. You could pick up your own copy of Daughters of the North, Jean Gordon and Mary Queen of Scots by Jennifer Morag Henderson online or from your favorite preferred local bookseller. Now, I can't believe it, but this is the last episode of season 2. So I would like to thank all of our guests and all of our viewers and listeners who have joined us throughout this year. I would like to thank our first episode guest in January. That was Heather Darcy, and she joined me to chat about her book, Stuart Spouses. In February, for episode 2, we welcomed back Gareth Russell, who conversed with me about Anna of Denmark and James I and his book, Queen James. With episode 3 in March, I spoke with Dr. Daniel Jordan, who discussed Thomas Butler, the Earl of Ossory, and more. In April, I presented a solo episode all about Shakespeare. I am a big Shakespeare fan, it has to be said. Yes. Then for episode 5 in May, I welcomed Justine Brown, who joined me for a restoration special where we talked about Charles II, the Restoration, Mary of Modena, and more. June brought episode 6 and Dr. Mark Sherwood, who chatted with me about the Glorious Revolution. In July, for episode 7, Dr. Stephen Virapin joined me to talk about James VI and First. In August, Mark Turnbull returned from season 1 as a guest to talk about Prince Rupert of the Rhine. In September, I was joined by Professor Nadine Ackerman and Dr. Pete Langman, who chatted with me about 17th century espionage and Elizabeth of Bohemia. For episode 10 in October, Dr. Erica Canella came to discuss those radical early Quakers, the subject of her book, Zealous. Last month, for episode 11 in November, Susan Abernethy joined me to chat about Portuguese history and Catherine of Braganza, the subject of her recently released biography, Charles II's Portuguese Queen. And last but not least, Jennifer Morag Henderson, who joined us today for our final episode of this season. Again, I am so grateful to all of our guests for their time and expertise. And I'm very profoundly grateful for the work, time, and dedication that my husband, Gavin, has put into this show for the past 2 years. He's been my rock, is supportive, and absolutely steadfast chap. He's great, and I cannot do this show and anything really without his support. He's great, and yeah, he's probably rushing right now. But yeah, he's great. So I'm gonna say that. Sorry, hon. So if you missed any of these episodes, they're all available to watch on my YouTube channel. Just head on over to the 17th Century Lady, and you'll find them in the live section. All being well, we will return next month in January 2026 for season 3 of the show. Yeah, I can't believe it either. But we already have quite a lineup of guests who will continue to keep it Stuart. Until then, I wish you a very Merry Christmas and a healthy and Baroque-tastic New Year. Goodbye.